Welcome to the EntreEd Talk podcast, the show by educators, for educators, parents, and the community. We're so excited to bring this to you. I'm Toi.
And I'm Laura, and we're excited to uplift best practices in entrepreneurship education.
And don't forget to like, rate, and subscribe to the EntreEd Talk podcast on whatever platform you listen. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another fun episode of the EntreEd Talk podcast. We are so excited to have Tony Donen with us. Dr. Tony Donen has worked as a high school principal since 2003. Originally born in South Africa, Tony grew up in Canada and then the United States, where he graduated from high school in New Jersey. Tony received a bachelor's degree in engineering from Virginia Tech University, a master's degree in teaching from East Tennessee State University, and his doctorate degree in educational leadership from Trevecca Nazarene University. Tony is the founding principal for STEM School Chattanooga and is committed to helping improve STEM education throughout the country. Since the inception of the STEM school, the school has become a national leader in STEM education. The school has been recognized by America Achieves as one of 30 schools worldwide denoted as a world-leading learner school. That's not easy to say. Recognized by the Fab Foundation for prominence in digital fabrication STEM education and the Tennessee Department of Education Commissioner as a model for the rest of the state. Tony has led professional development for innovative leadership throughout Tennessee as one of the lead principals for the Innovative Leaders Institute for School Leadership Teams. He has also co-authored 2 books, Grades Don't Matter, Using Assessment to Measure True Learning, and Let Me Try It, Enhancing Maker Education Through Digital Fabrication. In 2018, Tony was awarded the Tennessee STEM Innovator Award, the highest STEM recognition in Tennessee, recognizing Tennesseans that demonstrate outstanding contributions to support STEM education and outreach. Oh my goodness, that is awesome and a lot of stuff to unpack. Welcome, Tony. We're so excited to have you today.
I'm excited to be here, and boy, I really feel really good about myself right now.
You are our next victim on the EntreEd. Congratulations.
Those are some big words, Toi. Good job on those big words.
Oh, I know. I can't even believe it. Hey, so Tony, we're so excited. Before we dive into so many things, we like to ask our guests that 30,000 mile high view of your trajectory. And so how can you share a little bit about your life and career, and how did you get to where you are today?
So I would say, to start out with, when I was in high school and I graduated high school, I vowed I would never step foot in a high school again, right? As soon as you make that vow to yourself, you know that you've jinxed yourself to somehow find yourself back there someday. But I got an engineering degree, thought that's what I was going to do. And then one day I was living in my apartment complex next to a high school, and you could see the high school football stadium. And so I decided, you know what, I'm just going to be the next great football coach. So I went down to the local high school one day and said, I'm here, I'm here to coach. And they said, we're not interested. So I went back for 2 straight weeks. And eventually the coach said, you're not going away. So I started my path into education by washing the practice uniforms.
Better than water boy, I think.
I don't know. Some of those uniforms. I just kind of worked my way in, started helping some kids with math, started doing some substitute teaching. And next thing I knew, I was like, you know what? I think I have a passion for working with high schoolers. I'd like to see if I can help make high school a better experience for students. So started in that path, got a teaching certification, started teaching math, and then I was at a school, and the principal was removed, and the assistant principal became the principal, and my wife, which was my girlfriend at the time, and my mother-in-law, sort of got together and said, hey, you'd be a pretty good assistant principal. And so when 3 women tell you to do something, you do it, right? So that's what you do.
Or nobody's happy, right?
That's right. So I did that.
As your wife and not as your mother-in-law.
Yeah, so I did that. And that was only about 1.5 years before that principal was moved to a different spot. And before I knew it, I was the principal of that school. And then I was there for about 10 years. And then during that time, obviously I've met a lot of different people over that time, but one of my directors had moved on to superintendent in another school district, and they were starting these STEM schools across the state of Tennessee. And so he reached out to me and said, hey, come out, check out mine. And I was going through a doctorate program with somebody else who said, hold on, we're making one down in our district. And I came down to Chattanooga, and there was this empty warehouse, and they said, we want to make a school in it. And I was like, that sounds great. I think I'll do that. Basically, my interview was, the superintendent was like, how innovative are you? And I said, to a fault. And he's like, I think you're what we're looking for. So we started this STEM school, and really what was a broken down old manufacturing warehouse, and kind of began, it's on a community college campus, trying to begin to rethink what could school look like to really transform the types of things we expect high schoolers to be able to do. If one part of the spectrum is traditional school, we kind of went to the ledge, jumped off the cliff, went on the beach by ourselves, and started to think of how can we redesign school differently.
Woo! I'm amazed. From engineer to I'm not giving up. Did you play football? I'm curious. Or did you decide I'm going to help with football?
I did play some football. I was not a good football player, but I always thought I'd be a good coach.
My mom used to say about my brother, he did a really good job spitting on the sidelines when he was on the team. Yeah. So you've mentioned the school, and it's fascinating. I think a lot of good things start in warehouses or garages. Tell us what you think are some of the key elements of your school's success, because clearly you've gotten a lot of successes.
Well, I think part of it is it's not really focusing on success, right? I think a lot of people want to say like, talk to me about a score or talk to me about this metric. And really what we decided early on was we weren't going to focus on the product. We were going to focus on the process. When I got hired, we literally it was the superintendent got a grant, the district funded, we're going to make this school. And I was hired, and we had 6 weeks to start the school. Wow. So from the time I was hired, that's 6 weeks to hire the teachers, get everything together, put everything in place. Kids are coming to the door 6 weeks later. So during that 6 weeks time frame, we had thought about different things. What are we going to do to really think about this differently? I can remember going to a meeting with central office on my first day, and I'd look up PBL the night before, because I kept hearing PBL and I didn't know what PBL was. So I looked up the night before and I was like, I think I've got this down. So I went into this meeting they were talking about, and I said, hey, you keep talking about this PBL thing. Do you mean project-based learning or problem-based learning? And it went dead silent. And I quickly realized I might be the most knowledgeable person in the room based off an internet search the night before. So I was like, okay, we are really starting from ground zero. So let's go find business and industry, what they're looking for. And the reality was we went to a bunch of different businesses, went to higher ed, went to all over across that 6 weeks and asked, what do you want kids to be able to do? And the number one thing we did not hear, we didn't hear it at all, ever, was content. We never heard anything about content. What we heard was all process skills. So the three, we did one of those Wordles where the words, these are the ones said most often. So the ones said most often were critical thinking, innovation, and collaboration. And so the reason I'm kind of going through this story is because we decided early on we were going to raise the value of these process skills. We were going to say critical thinking, innovation, and collaboration are as important, if not more important, than content learning. Now, that is a fundamental paradigm shift in how you do school. If you go to any high school in the country and you say, what's my kid going to learn? Somebody's going to pull out a 4-year plan of content. They're going to take this math course in 9th grade. Maybe they have these options in 10th grade. They're going to all talk about content, and they're going to talk about the success of their school based on content only. So to shift to go, our success is based on whether kids can critically think, innovate, and collaborate is a completely different mind shift in terms of how you think about school. Now, we didn't make content number 85 on the list. We made it one. We have 1 and 1A. In the world we live in, you can't just ignore content, right? You still get assessed on content. But we said process is going to be as important. So fundamentally, that is a shift So if you come to the school, people always get amazed with the different things happening, or they get enthralled by something like, oh, you got houses. Like we have Harry Potter type houses that we do based on Myers-Briggs temperament. People are like, oh, I'll do that. The reality is that's not the magic. The magic is make a fundamental shift in making process the most important, if not tied with content as the most important thing you do in school. And then the activities and programs you put in place will be drastically different than what you would do if you were just content focused.
Wow. That's so amazing. And we, when we talk about entrepreneurship education, and I mentioned that we've been putting our training online, and that's exactly what we talk about is pulling in. So, okay, so you've got your content. How do you start to make that shift by pulling in those things, the creativity, the innovation, the collaboration, all of those awesome pieces. And we talk to teachers about, because we, most of the teachers we deal with can't just start a new school. And so we say, okay, bring it in one little piece at a time and just keep moving forward. And eventually you'll wake up and be like, oh, wow, I have this amazing culture in my school and classroom. But you mentioned that the paradigm shift, and I think it'd be a fun thing. Let's say I'm a 10th grader or ish. Mm-hmm. What is a day in the life of a 10th grader at your school? What does that look like?
Yeah, so it could be different, but for the most part, we have mods, which are your basic periods that you're going to as a 10th grader, right? You're still going to content area pieces, like you still have an English class, you still have a math class, you still have a science class, but we think about how we do those classes differently, right? There's very little sit and get, right? Like you're just sitting there. The teacher is doing all the innovating, all the critical thinking, and they're dispensing information, and you're just a regurgitator. Like that is the opposite of what we do. So like, even if you're going to your math class, the goal is for you to be the person seeking out information, the teacher facilitating that process, helping provide resources, answering questions, but not being the lecturer, you could say, in that setting. Now, depending on the content or depending on the level, it could change a little bit. But for a 10th grader, your day would start off, we call it tech time. It's all the 10th graders together. They do all sorts of various things. They do personal passion projects. It's a hodgepodge of everything you can think of, just trying to excite them and get them interested in doing things, but thinking about how they go about tackling problems in different ways. Then you might go off, you might have your English class or your math class or whatever that may be throughout the day, history class. But a lot of those classes would be project-based learning focused, right? You would have, for instance, just before we hit COVID-19, our 10th graders were working on their TED Talks for their English class. So, and I think in chemistry class, they were making perfume. Right. And so, but there's content pieces that they have to show. Everything has rubrics, and we do standards-based grading, which is a whole other conversation, but everything has a rubric of your proficient advanced levels of showing your learning target understanding. So that would be 10th grade. They also have a time during the day that we call it PBL time. PBL for us, we have different kinds of PBLs. We have PBL, which is a cross-curricular, all your classes. And then we have mini PBLs, which we call a single content area project. So we have a time in the day where you actually meet with your team and you're doing a cross-curricular project. In 10th grade, they're all with a business partner. So for instance, they were working with a business called Anchor Analytics. They basically do Six Sigma type of work. Our kids were designing video games in Scratch and trying to use lean manufacturing principles and how they were designing their game and for the game play. It's a little bit different for a 9th grader, and then it's a lot different for the juniors and seniors.
That's awesome. That's really cool. We've talked to a lot of people that have in our world that have had some, level of success in changing their schools, and that community engagement and that community partnership part of it usually comes up in those conversations, because that, like you said, you interviewed the businesses and asked them what they wanted, and that's how you kind of had that structure for your school. So that's really cool. That I think that's a key at least takeaway for me, is that community partnership with with schools. It really changes. It changes the game, pun intended, the game for kids.
Absolutely.
For me, Tony, your vocabulary is different. And I'm so amazed at that, because not only are you mentally made a mind shift and helped your students and your parents to do that, but just by the vocabulary, just by calling personal passion project. I've never heard of school allowing yes, they maybe do projects in computer class, and mine did that in high school, but to actually empower the kids with even the words that they use and how they approach their learning. So leads me to, you have this very unique model, and obviously you must have unique teachers, that work with you. Tell us about your leadership style, and how do you manage that with these kids who are eager to learn and teachers who want to, do things differently? How do you lead?
I guess the basic gist of it is I would call it tight and loose, right? And it's just a leadership philosophy of there's certain things tight that you're going to hold to and say, we're all going to be in this together. All right. And then loose, like how we get there. Right. So tight, we're going to hold process. We're going to hold to this critical thinking, innovation, and collaboration, as that is going to be important in our school and how we focus, how we do things. Loose looks a lot different depending on what classroom you go in, what teachers are working together, what kids are doing. So like how you get there, the programs, the items you create, personal passion project, those are all things created by people, not by me. They're just created, providing the teachers and the kids the opportunity to really go out and experiment and try things, right? And so when that happens, almost everything at our school has been created because people have the opportunity to create, right? Like if we're tight and we say innovation is important, then innovation is important for everybody in the school, whether you're a kid, whether you're a staff, front office, whether you're the teacher. So then we have to value that, and we have to say, hey, you got an idea? Great. Let's go try it. Right. And you've got to understand with innovation, there is failure. There's always going to be failure. It's an iterative process. So you have to be able, if you're going to hold tight to innovation, you got to be loose, knowing there's lots of different ways you might get there. So I'd say in essence, that's sort of my philosophy. I'm not a micromanager, but I like to think about like, we're going to hold to this philosophy. So like, for instance, when we do teacher evaluation, it became apparent quickly we couldn't just go into the room and go, we're going to do traditional teacher observation, because traditional teacher observation is watching the teacher. Well, that doesn't work if you want the kids to be innovative, collaborative, and critically think. You actually have to watch the kids, and you have to talk to the kids and ask the kids what they're doing. What's the purpose? What are you trying to get? What kind of feedback have you gotten? How do you know how to improve what you're working on? So that changes how you do observations. Then at the end, it becomes apparent you still have a traditional structure in terms of feedback. Like you have, we call it our building, which is relationships with kids is the foundation of the building. It's not something I believe that's innate to a teacher. Like you either love kids or you don't, right? So we try and hire people that love kids. And then after that, can you manage your classroom? Can you create engaging activities? Do you know how to use assessment at a high level? Well, that's kind of one part of a pendulum. That's kind of a traditional setting. So we still have that piece, but then at the other side of the pendulum on observation, we have a vertical building. How much critical thinking, access, use, and apply information are kids doing in a room? How much collaborating are they doing in a room? And how much innovating are they doing in the room? So any observation could swing back and forth on that pendulum. It could be in the middle where there's a little bit of feedback on your kind of traditional structural approaches to teaching and learning. And then it could be feedback on what are we doing in terms of what we call our tenets, our process skills that we hold dear. So that's probably a really long answer for that short question. But
well, I'm hearing your engineering in the background there. And that's impressive. I mean, you don't normally see a principal who's been an engineer. I mean, Tori, you're one. So here I got two unique people here in our conversation that have been. But at the same time, I think that probably does influence your leadership style as an engineer first and as a principal, that you then gave up the control that a lot of leaders like. It sounds like you've really given the power back over to everybody in the building And it sounds like you're an awesome listener.
I don't know if I'm an awesome listener as much as I am an awesome, hey, it's okay. Like I've taken off the fear of failure. Right. And that's from me being a parent as well. Right. I got 3 daughters, and if you read and you watch what happens with girls, what's the number one thing that happens? They get stressed out and they are afraid to take any risks. Right. And it typically starts to happen in middle school. And so I was like, hey, just from a dad perspective, I'm like, hey, we've got to run our school in a way that if kids are afraid to take a risk, or a teacher's afraid to take a risk, then we are not meeting, or we're not living what we're holding tight to, which is we're not living innovation if we're afraid to take risks. So I think that's a fundamental piece of our school. So there's so many intertwined things, but the foundation has to do with elevating those process skills.
That's incredible. And you're absolutely right about raising kids. It kind of gives you a different perspective, doesn't it? You mentioned assessment at a higher level, or the highest level. And you have 2 books, and the one is called, and I really want to know about this, because the one is Grades Don't Matter, Using Assessment to Measure True Learning. When we talk about entrepreneurship, a lot of times it's like, okay, we're talking about this innovative practice and collaboration and all of these mindsets, but the assessment topic always comes up. And it's like, how do you assess creativity? And you obviously are doing it not only with kids, but with your faculty as well. So can you speak a little bit about that book? And also the titles are great with these books. Let Me Try It is the other one. I love the titles of these books.
All right. So their background stories to both. Grades Don't Matter. The background story is, in a traditional setting, the way we do grades is not about learning, but it's about compliance. So the kids that generally do well, or well enough, are kids that are just compliant. They're turning their work in on time. They're meeting. They're nice in class. It's all the things that are like, but what does that have to do with actually learning, right? If the content is understanding how to factor a trinomial, I'm not saying I think that's the most important content you need to know, but I'm just saying, let's just pretend the state says kids need to know how to factor trinomial, right? If a kid goes home, copies it, but brings it in the next day and turns it in on time and gets 100, that doesn't tell you anything good, right? That just tells you the kid was compliant. And another kid that might know how to do it was like, I'm not doing the homework. We'll give you a 0, right? So it doesn't make any sense. Right. So the Grades Don't Matter is about how do you rethink about grading so that it's really about if they know it, not when they know it. Right. So, for instance, we have learning targets for all of our classes. Those are the key building blocks we decide are important to learn for each class. And the kid has to show mastery of that. So we have mastery levels for that. The kids have to show they have rubrics, or they have assessments, but it's not about when kids know something. It's about if kids know something. So it doesn't, if you can show me back to the factoring trinomial, you can show me on the first try, or you can show me on the 88th try. I don't care. What I care about is that you can show me you can do it. Right. And so it transitions a kid into thinking, hold on. So I can be unsuccessful at something, but I can keep working at it until I am successful at it. And then you're going to give me the same credit as if I wasn't successful the first time. Yeah, because it's only matters if you are successful, not when you were successful. Right. And so it re-challenges how you go about thinking and how you go about approaching the learning process. So that's really how we do our assessments. On any particular assessment, you don't have like a 91, right? So a kid comes back, I say, what'd you get? I got a 91. What does that mean? I think it means my mom's okay with it. Like it doesn't tell you anything about learning. So we actually have levels. So we just call them advanced, proficient, below basic, and missing, right? So missing, we don't have any evidence for you. Below basic is you haven't met the level we're expecting yet. Proficient is, all right, you've hit it. You've showed the two lower levels of Bloom, knowledge and comprehension of this particular target. And then in advanced, you're showing the higher levels of Blooms. So it gets kids to rethink about, they go around and they walk around school and they're like, oh man, learning target 5, I still got a below basic. I need to bring that to proficient. That's a whole different, who talks like that? Well, the kids in my school do. You go to a traditional school, they're like, did you hand it in? Yeah, I got 50. What does that mean? I'm done. I don't need to, I can't even fix it anyway. So, or I didn't do it, I got a 0. Well, what does it mean? I don't know. I guess I'm failing this class, so I won't do anything more the rest of the semester, which is just a negative mindset about going about learning. So that's kind of the grades don't matter. That was the emphasis on it. Obviously, since we've moved to process skills as well, we do some assessments. And I could talk a little bit about how we build up to entrepreneurship in a little bit if you want me to. And that would probably feed back into the assessment of the process skills. But I'll jump over to the other one. Let me try it. So Let Me Try It was based on when we started doing projects with kids were doing a lot of, they were doing research, they were ideating, and they were presenting. And we were like, that doesn't really, after we did that a while, we're like, that looks nice, but and people are like, wow, look at what your kids are doing. And I was like, yeah, but they're not doing any iteration, right? They're not breaking anything, figuring out how to make something better, trying again. Oh, that didn't work again. What do I do again? Like, you have to go through an iterative process in everything you do to try and get to the end you want to get to, right? Every product I know of goes through an iterative process. Every process I know that goes through an iterative. Why would we have kids do like one and dones? We found the Fab Lab at MIT, digital fabrication labs, which are basically, if you can think about it, you can make it. Really what's called the third digital revolution. You've got computers, then you had phones, and now digital fabrication is actually the third digital, where you can make anything you want to make if you have the right tools with you. We began doing that, and what we found was when we focused on digital fabrication and kids making, they went through this iterative process. They just wanted to try stuff. It went away from like the come on to the just let me try it. Let me try something. Let me do this. So that's obviously where the book came from. The idea of really engaging kids in making. Everybody wants to make something. It's the consumption of things that we just get tied into, and kids generally just don't like just to consume, sit and consume. They get bored at school. They get bored of what you do, and they start to think, why do I even have to come to school? I can literally sit on my phone and get everything you're telling me. Why do I even need to come to school anymore? So Let Me Try It is that, hey, emphasis on, hey, you can come to school because we're going to do, and you can make and be able to do cool stuff that you wouldn't have been able to do if you didn't come to school. Well, now I got a reason to come to school.
Wow.
Amazing.
Hi all, we are super excited to offer an exclusive discount for our listeners to attend this year's EntreEd Forum taking place on November 18th and 19th in Chattanooga, Tennessee. We have an incredible lineup of speakers and experiential learning opportunities to help you ignite entrepreneurial thinking and integrate entrepreneurship into your learning communities. Use promo code EntreEd Talk to receive 5% off of every individual registration. Again, that's promo code EntreEd Talk. To learn more about the forum and register, visit www.entre-ed.org today and subscribe for updates as we launch new things happening every week as part of the planning for the forum. Thanks. See you there.
You used a really key word when you're talking about the first book, and grades don't matter, the word yet. We read a lot of research about how important that word is in learning. And if you may not know it now, but you don't know it yet, correct? And so yet is a powerful word, I think, for students. What you're talking about, I would love to know, what are a couple of just blow your head off examples that came out of that MIT Fab Lab and fabrication from your students? Can you give us a couple examples of some really cool stuff?
I'll give you the first year we opened the Fab Lab, right? And I still got this background on my phone. First year we opened the Fab Lab, and so I at one point I do need to talk about the hierarchy of how we get to entrepreneurship and how we built to that, because this story will also tie to that. But the first year we did it, we had our kids in their junior year be able to access the lab, and we made business partnerships, and the business partnerships would pose problems to us. And so that first year we had our local power company they do holiday windows like Macy's in New York City, right? They've been doing it since 1950 or maybe earlier in Chattanooga. I don't know when, but they've been doing it, and it's the same, right? This is the same snowman every year, right? And they're like, I wonder what your kids would come up with. We had this group, and they were made up of a girl that basically she thought she was just into music. It was a boy who constantly been disengaged with school, probably one of the lower performing math students we had in that year, and just another student just kind of like middle of the road, just kind of floating along. And three of them got together, and they're like, this is kind of right after Frozen came out, and they're like, I wonder if we could build an ice castle. They're like, build an ice castle. So they're like, I wonder how you even do that. So they started to ask, like, how do you use this equipment in here? Next thing you know, they were designing something, and they built a little model ice castle, probably like 1 foot by 1.5 feet. And during the presentations to our sponsor, there's all these executives from our local power board. They stopped the kids in the middle of the presentation, pulled me and the teacher outside and say, could they actually build this? And we're like, yeah. Next thing we know, the kids over the next couple weeks, they have built a 30-foot by 10-foot by 40-foot ice castle that was the signature piece for the windows downtown. That, it's still on my phone because it's so. I don't know if you can see that.
Gosh.
Wow.
My daughters were little, and things that they had to do to build the ice castle. You could see their sort of conical sphere, those things at the end of a castle that have like the cones on top. Well, you can't cut that. This is all done in acrylic. You can't cut a cone. So they had to actually figure out how to use trigonometry to actually make the cone and cut the shapes. And the one kid that was the poor math student was like, I think we can use law of cosines. Like, law of cosines is really useful. Right? And I was like, what kid, even when I taught AP calculus, I'm not sure I ever had a kid that said, this law of cosines is really useful. Right?
Parents are kissing you at this moment.
Yeah. So like that was our first aha. Like that was our first year that we had the Fab Lab, and that was our first aha. Right? To here we are now 6 years later of having that Fab Lab, and the things that kids are designing. I mean, we've had a group that made what's the Build-A-Bears. You know, the stuffed Build-A-Bears. They went down to Build-A-Bear and like, I wonder if we can make a Build-A-Bear that you can actually learn how to code. So they began building in the infrastructure within the bear to try and figure out how can you make a codable Build-A-Bear so kids could buy a Build-A-Bear, but you could buy one that kids could actually begin learning how to code, right? And they can make their bear do different things. I can go to our list. We're currently working with Tanzania. We've got a group from Tanzania in Africa that reached out to us and said, hey, we've got girls that we're trying to make STEM initiatives for in our area. Could you work with us? And we got teams of kids working with these girls in Tanzania, and they're actually showing them how to program and create an app so that they, in their area, they have a lot of people that die from cancer based on the water. There's got high mercury levels, but people don't know the warning signs. So they're helping these girls create an app that the people in Tanzania, most of them actually have phones that would be to give them information on warning signs so that they can connect with people early to be like, oh man, starting down this issue, I need to be careful about what I'm putting in my body. So it's all sorts of cool, amazing stuff. I got a list that you go on our website, you could just see years and years of projects that are really cool.
I know what Laura's going to say next.
Tanzania for a year. I'm trying to hold it back, Toi.
I knew it. I was like, oh.
To my heart. I still keep up with several guys that were my co-teachers in Tanzania, and I would love to hook them up with you, Tony. So.
Oh, there you go. Great. Yeah, so we used to look for partners, and now at this point, we have people like Tanzania, they reached out. We have people contact us because of the type of work that the kids are able to do. So yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Well, you're going to get to know a name, Tito Kalali, pretty soon. I'm emailing him probably today. We talked yesterday via email, but It's coming. Okay.
All right. I like that.
We have to close. We could probably talk to you for 5 hours, but we like to keep this at a digestible amount of time for a podcast. But everything you've talked about just keeps reminding me of growth mindset and how you're basically building that in your students, which is really incredible. Just that one little piece of learning that like Laura said, just learning how to, okay, I can fail at this and it's okay. It's all right. And that is such an amazing life skill. And just everything you've talked about is so wonderful and consistent with what we hope that schools are able to do with their students. So educators out there that listen to this, if you had some parting advice, something that, maybe I'm an educator and I want to start moving in this direction with my students, what's some advice that you might give to that person?
Yeah. So we have people come to our school often, and we even do some training days. And what we end up doing is they get to see the school. And when they walk through the school and we do tours, and the tours are all the time, like we don't do anything different. It's whatever's happening is happening. But they often leave the tour and they're like, the one thing that sticks out to them is the amount of ownership and autonomy the kids have. They come from settings where they feel like they have to tell the kid everything, or the kid won't comply, right? And they're like, your kids are doing things without even being told to do things. Like they're like, we don't understand, like we can't compute. And so what I tell them is, you got to start with opportunities to empower them, and without making it a negative experience for them, right? Without a negative grade or whatever it may be. At a teacher level, I tell them there's two things you can do, right? One is, can you identify skills that are important? And we have 3, but those aren't necessarily the right ones. There's the 4 C's. You can go see Tony Wagner's work. He has 7 different critical skills that he said are necessary or essential for the job workforce out of Harvard. Like, pick, right? And then actually work on how would you teach those kids that skill or skills, and how would you embed that into what you're already doing? So if you picked something easy like collaboration, you would go, okay, I've been teaching this way, but none of the kids get to do anything together. So maybe I might be able to do it this way, where they can actually, there's some required interaction, right? So pick that. So that's kind of an easy launching point. The other one is something called a SOLE, which is a self-organized learning environment, SOLE. SOLE is a single lesson, and you can go to, if you look it up online, there's actually a website. And it's built on the fact of having a big question, right? That's really unanswerable. It doesn't have a right or wrong answer. And starting a class with that question and letting the kids go research, dive out. They can go to different groups. They can move around, come up with things, and have an end product within that lesson. Could be a short presentation, could be a slideshow, could be whatever you want it to be. But the SOLE is a one lesson transformation of how school looks in your classroom. It puts the engagement and the autonomy of the learning on to the student, not the teacher. The teacher has to learn how to just answer questions with questions in a SOLE and not be the expert in the room. They can be the clarifier after the whole SOLE is done, but the SOLE really transformed what the classroom experience looks like. So I would we always encourage teachers, like, if you haven't, some want to jump into PBL, but PBL is really a lot more complicated than that. SOLE is a great entry point. You can do it in a single lesson to really transform that educational experience in your classroom.
I love that idea. That's so cool. Because that's what we try to tell educators, that just take one lesson, start there, and focus on what you're trying to bring into your class. That's great. Well, could you tell anyone who wants to learn about you or your books how they could reach out to you? And we will, in the show notes, we'll make sure we have links to all that stuff as well. But how can folks reach out to you if they want to learn more about what you're doing?
Gotcha. So they can Obviously, just go to the STEM School Chattanooga. If they just type in STEM School Chattanooga, Google that, go to the website. There's a way to contact me through that. Then contact me by email. I've got several different ones, Donen_T@hcd.org. Also Twitter @TonyDonen. So if you just do that, that's an easy way to get me. And if you go to my Twitter right now, you can see I don't know why I agreed to do this, but I'm on my 20th day in a row. Every day we've been out of school since COVID, I agreed to do a TikTok. So now I'm on day 21 of my TikToks. Yeah. So if you want to just laugh at an old bald guy, go to the TikToks. That'll work out really well for you. In terms of entrepreneurship, just so everyone knows, we didn't even get into that, but we build in our culminating event as seniors, we run a pitch competition where kids go through their senior year. By senior year, they've gone through a lot of these projects where other people have identified the problem. And then their senior year, they actually go through the whole D-School cycle, starting with empathy to identify issues that matter to them, define the exact problem, create their solutions, create a business, pitch around the solution, and pitch it to entrepreneurs. So in Chattanooga, we've had every beginning of January. So if you're interested in connecting, Chattanooga is also a way to connect in terms of reaching out to me or us at the school.
That is so great. Oh, well, we definitely need to have you back.
We're coming to school. I don't know. We might be there a day. We might be there 3 weeks. We're coming to your school.
Yeah, we're definitely going.
Awesome. We like people coming.
Tony, thank you so much for this conversation. And I know that you have inspired, or when it comes out, you will have inspired so many people that are listening to this, because you already obviously have inspired so many already. So thank you so much. And we just look forward to further conversations, and so grateful for you to be here.
All right. Well, thanks for having me.